Today is Westwood Way Tuesday. You will remember that last week, Mr. Smith gave the first value awards. This week is our turn to focus on the Westwood Way with a program on the civil rights movement. Reporter Brianna Brooks is here with a panel for discussion how things have changed or have not yet changed.
Good morning. We have invited 3 African Americans from different generations to get a sense of how the civil rights movement has affected their lives. With me is Dr. Cheryl Washington. Dr. Washington is the Deputy Superintendent for Westwood School District 2. My second guest is state columnist Bertram Rantin. Rantin's column highlights great things done by people in the Columbia community. Our third guest is our own teacher, Lakesha Cook. We wanted to look back at our civil rights movement to see what life was like before, how it has changed, and what still needs to happen. Let's begin with a very brief look at the civil rights movement. The civil rights, modern civil rights movement, with the arrest of Rosa Parks in Montgomery, Alabama. Parks' refusal to give up her seat on the bus resulted in a massive bus boycott, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The movement focused on nonviolence. Student-led sit-ins in Greensboro, North Carolina, and organized freedom rides throughout the South resulted in violence nonetheless. In 1963, in a protest, Birmingham, Alabama police used clubs, vicious dogs, and water cannons. Many people across the United States were outraged. King organized a march on Washington where the highlight was his "I Have a Dream" speech. First, with the support of John F. Kennedy and later Lyndon B. Johnson, Congress was pressured to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Attention turned to securing the right to vote for African Americans. In 1970, public schools across the South were forced to desegregate. The claim by whites was that schools in the South were separate but equal came to an end and with desegregation. Now for our questions. Please feel free to join in at any of these questions. What was it like for you personally before and during the civil rights movement?
Well, I guess I could speak to that. I believe that everybody had various experiences, and my father was military. I grew up in the Army. I spent most of my time in Germany before we moved here when I was 16. So my involvement was somewhat limited, and my exposure was somewhat limited, because in the military during that time, schools were already integrated, and we lived in an integrated society as a military post. So I really don't think that my sisters and I had a real feel for the civil rights movement. We would read about it. My parents would talk to us about it until we moved to Columbia in 1965. In 1965, I was 16, and the first time going to a segregated school. We had 2 high schools in Columbia, C.A. Johnson and Booker T. Washington, and I went to C.A. Johnson. It was it was a real eye-opener, real eye-opener.
In my case, I was I'm a product now of the many things that have come out of the civil rights movement. The actual movement began about 5 years before I was born. Mm-hmm. But I actually attended for the first, I guess, 4 years, first through third or fourth through first grade, segregated schools. So I remember the idea of actually coming together, going to school at that point that we were going to go to school with the white students. But really it wasn't until years later that I was really old enough to really understand and to start to read in what would become history, modern day history, the significance of what that meant. So I got to be a product of seeing that process go along. And so it's been kind of exciting, has been exciting for me through the years, beginning with junior high school, to look back and realize that while I was not there at the very beginning, that I was around for some of the origins of some of that incredible movement.
Yeah. Okay. Anything you want to add, Ms. Cook?
Well, because I'm on this end of the spectrum now, we all are products of this movement. And I think later on in the interview, as we move forward, there are a lot of change agents. There are a lot of transformation that has occurred within society with the equality and those sorts of things that I am just reaping the benefits of them. Of the sacrifices that had been previously made. So I'm grateful for that. So,
Dr. Washington, how was teaching before integration and after it?
Well, I'd have to speak as a student on that. I started teaching in Richland School District 2 in 1980. I was 30 years old, married, 2 children before I went into education. But before that, attending high school at C.A. Johnson, predominantly all African-American teachers. One just retired, I believe, for the second time from Richmond Northeast, Mrs. Zelma Presley. She was my 10th grade English teacher. She doesn't like me to tell people that. But if anybody out there knows her, she was my English teacher. But it was all black teachers, strictly African-American population. During my years in high school, they started the freedom of choice. And freedom of choice simply meant that you could go to any school, but your parents had to provide the transportation. Well, as African-American families, I don't know about the rest of the families, but in my family we had one car. And my dad was out at Fort Jackson. So either he took the car, my mother took him, and my sisters and I walked to school. So for us, freedom of choice just really didn't have any meaning whatsoever. And for a lot of us, it did not. But several of my friends did leave and go to various schools like Keenan, Eau Claire, AC Flora, Dreer. Dreer was the big school to go to. But when they were talking about freedom of choice, we noticed that they would assign white teachers to Johnson, like my senior year, and take some of the African-American teachers and assign them to the white schools. And some of the African-American children would go to the white schools. But we never had a white student come to the black schools. It was just always leaving and going to the white schools, rather than coming to our black schools. So it was very different. And by the time they really enforced a lot of the integration with busing and everything else, I was out of high school.
Okay. All right. How has the civil rights movement changed America?
I think, as we said earlier, there have been many transformations on all different levels of whether it's African American, whether it's male or female. I believe that the equality that was the goal of the entire movement, I think that has been seen, or more of the benefits or more of the sanctions that have come about. So the equality, the right to vote, women being in many other roles, and that sort of thing. So I definitely believe still work in progress. It hasn't, even though the act has been signed and those sorts of things, there's still progress. There's still other areas in which we, as the younger generation and generations to come, have to do some work in as well. So again, just that equality that came about, and the issue that it's still we're still working on that. So
the one thing I would add is, just in addition to some of those very tangible differences, is just a continuing growing awareness that equality should be the norm, if not yet, but the idea that it's no longer acceptable for there to be different classes of people regardless of race or any other thing that may separate folks.
Okay. And the most difficult thing is, and you learn this as you get older, you cannot change one's heart. You simply cannot change how they feel about certain issues. Any prejudices, discrimination, you cannot change that. You can change the environment and force the issue, which in a lot of cases we've had to do, but you cannot change one's heart. I don't know what it takes for that. I think it takes a lot of experience, a lot of exposure to get out and to really see the world as it really is and to understand. But that is something that I've always thought about, and I've always wondered about. How do you change someone's heart?
All right. What are some things that still need to be done even after the civil rights movement?
It's a long list.
Yeah, I think let's start now. I think, it goes back to what just Dr. Washington was saying, beginning with the heart. But I think continuing to let those generations to come, and even, people now, just making them aware of the sacrifices again, making them aware that there are issues that still exist, but again, getting to the heart of the people, or of those generations.
And also to that end, as someone who works in communication, I think it's important that we continue to set the stage for people to have conversations with each other, someone who may not be like them, so that you can understand someone's point of view. And by that point of view, I don't necessarily mean those who have traditionally have always been in the minority, but maybe folks from other side who have not held some of the negative feelings or aspects about civil rights to say, this is what I'm thinking. So I think dialogue, this is a great example. I think that's something that's really important if people just continue to talk and say, tell me what it was like, not just on the panel, but what was it like growing up for you? And I wasn't aware of that experience. You know?
Like how it felt with everyone. All right. What was the greatest accomplishment that you guys think happened in the civil rights movement?
I'm not sure that I would say the greatest. I would think the movement itself, the fact that something was not continuously ignored, but you can go back to certain things that nowadays, except under the most extreme circumstances, someone would never go on a bus and be told you can't sit here, or that you can't vote, or that sort of thing. So I would say the movement itself, because for me at least, it's hard to isolate any one specific aspect that stands out.
I agree.
The one that I thought about, I guess, just several months ago when there was a lot of talk among the legislatures and our governor about having to have IDs to vote. Now, to me, at my age, at 63, to me, that is a major setback. We are going back in time and not moving forward. I see that as a form of discrimination. Whether the intent is that, I don't know. But I see that as a form of discrimination.
Okay. What do you think still needs to be done in our society now? I mean, with the different people and how they interact with each other, what do you think needs to be done?
And I don't know if I'm going to get a lot of trouble for saying this, but when I look at our young people, young African Americans, not taking advantage of the opportunities that are there for them, not looking back, not thinking about how they've arrived here. It's like they have absolutely no idea, no concept of what it took and all the lives that were lost and sacrifices made for us to be here, for Ms. Cook to be teaching here at Westwood High, for me to be a deputy superintendent in Richland School District 2, for Bertram to be a columnist for a state newspaper. It's just a lot of people, a lot of young people as I see it, have missed the boat on that. And I don't know what we can do, except for things like this that you're doing, to make them cognizant of all that and the time that I believe that a lot of them are wasting, doing other things that just don't make any sense. Don't get me started.
We'll get in trouble with you.
Oh yeah, you'll get trouble with me. Okay.
Yeah. Do you think, as a young African American, how do you think you profited from the civil rights movement?
She said young.
Yeah, we both
Well, first of all, just being a African American teaching. With that, and also being a female African American teaching in a public school system speaks volumes to what the movement has or was set out to do or to be. So that in itself, I believe that I have definitely personally, have benefited from this particular movement. But just thinking about when I was in, I believe it was, grade school, elementary, before I came to District 2, I was in a Catholic school in Louisiana, Baton Rouge. And I was the only African-American female, African-American period in my entire class at this Catholic school, And I can still remember to this day, I would ask my mom, why am I the only, dark spot in this, because I had no awareness, of that. Until I gotten, older, got to Richland 2, things look a little different as far as, in my classroom there were students who looked like me. In elementary where I went to North Springs and Summit and Spring Valley, so on and so forth, I began to see, people who look like me, and then I began to question my parents. And and that's where I gained the knowledge of the movement. What happened? What were the sacrifices? I was inquisitive. I wanted to know. And so that I could tell my children in the future, okay, this is what was done and this is what you got to do now. So having, those dialogues with parents, conversations, starting at home and that sort of thing. So that's where I benefited.
Okay. Is there anything else you guys want to add about the civil rights movement or about how
I would like to just say one thing about Fort Jackson. Fort Jackson had the first integrated school in the state of South Carolina. It was Hood I believe it's Hood Street. And Hood Street was built and opened in 1963, and it was the first integrated school in South Carolina. And as they had to bus the children from Fort Jackson to come off for middle school and high school, they had to go to their designated schools, which were segregated. So.
one other quick point, just to piggyback on what Dr. Washington said earlier. There, unfortunately, have been injustices and will continue to be, but the one thing I would say to add to your point is rather than focusing on the injustices, I would encourage young people, and particularly, and people of all ages, to spend more time focusing on bettering themselves and taking advantage of the opportunities rather than perhaps maybe using some injustices that should not have been there as an excuse not to achieve. Because as you mentioned earlier, you know, we have certainly faced some of those things. I'm not going to pretend that I've encountered it to the degree that many who have come before me, but I would like to feel that some of the things I've not encountered because I haven't allowed myself to even look at it. I've said, this is available for me, I'm going to work and I'm going to achieve to do it. So that would be my plug for that.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming today, and I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.